At the time of this Russia-Ukraine conflict, it becomes necessary to look into India's foreign policy under Narendra Modi-led BJP government. It is also necessary to understand the game plan of United States of America, Britain and the combined West. Almost 9 months back, that is, in the last year, that is in 2021, I published a video on this YouTube channel, Pandemic and New World Order, Is There Any Connection? In that video, I have categorically stated that United States of America, Britain and the Western Empire started their moves as early as year 2000 in order to manipulate the outcome of the current geopolitical chess game in their favor. And this gathered momentum year 2010 onwards. All the geopolitical events that have been unfolding right before our eyes since 2020 are part of a grand geopolitical chess game, and there is an agenda. United States of America, Britain and the Western Empire expected resistance while bringing in these changes. Hence, they started to instate their puppet governments or their pawns in important countries in order to make sure that when they actually push for these changes, they go unchallenged. They just wanted to ensure a relatively smooth ride for themselves, and United States of America and West used its regime change formula. In 2011, Indian political system was subverted through Bharat Swabhiman movement by Baba Ramdev and company and India Against Corruption movement by Arvind Kejriwal, Anna Hazare et al. As a result, Narendra Modi-led BJP won in 2014 election, that is 2014 general election, and this also made sure the rise of Aam Aadmi Party as a political force in India. We are now going to analyze Narendra Modi-led BJP's foreign policy with regards to this Russia versus Ukraine conflict. Let us first understand the agenda of the ruling elites. Ruling elites are at the heart of Judeo-Christian Anglo-American Western Empire. One of the agenda of the ruling elites is to bring in a one world government referred to as New World Order. They want to accomplish this task by the year 2030. National governments who participate in New World Order would be of symbolic importance only, that is, they would be more of a formality and placeholders, while the ruling elites and their corporates would be the real decision-making body. This is as good as enslavement of the masses through the involvement of the puppet national governments. This would allow the ruling elites the liberty to loot and plunder the resources of these countries through these puppet national governments. This, in a way, abolishes the concept of nation-states and national identity. This pandemic merely sets the stage for a new world order, but there are other goals as well.
Out of these troubled times, our fifth objective, a new world order, can emerge.
Ruling elites want to bring in great reset that would pave the way for what they refer to as new normal. This would be the reset and restructuring of every aspect of our life. It includes reset and re-engineering of the world economy, industrial infrastructure, food, education, healthcare, politics, sports, entertainment, and even our sexual understanding. That's what they want. It would be the orchestration of the biggest wealth transfer in the human history and an attempt to erase nearly 30 trillion USD worth of American national debts. Klaus Schwab and his World Economic Forum at Davos, Switzerland has been given the task to oversee this Great Reset project. World Economic Forum has been working in tandem with the Rockefeller Foundation, Clinton Foundation and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. In India and elsewhere, World Economic Forum has infiltrated into politics, business, education, press and media, sports, entertainment and NGOs. Bring in a completely digital economy and one world digital currency. And the transactions would be tied to a person's biometric identity. Trial run of a cashless society has already been done through the demonetization that we witnessed here in India in 2016. Narendra Modi-led BJP government obliged the West. This experimentation was influenced by USAID and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And in the whole scheme of the things, Indian citizens were used as experimental guinea pigs. And at the same time, West waged economic warfare against India through Narendra Modi-led BJP government. Ruling elites want to bring in fourth industrial revolution whose main aim would be to destroy, shut down the existing industrial and economic infrastructure and setup of the developing nations under the pretext of climate change and green energy. Bill Gates and Elon Musk are driving this. They want to bring in automation, robotics, machine learning and cybernetics in an aggressive way, and they want to introduce AI-driven robotic intervention in the industrial infrastructure, policing, surveillance, transportation, education, and healthcare. Mark my word, this Boston Dynamics robotic dog would be armed with guns one day. That day is not far ahead. It would be armed with guns and it would be used to shoot protesters in order to squash protests and agitation in future. Bring in a totalitarian surveillance state where biometric identity, digital economy and digital health card keep people tied to the control and surveillance grid, also called as population control grid. This is what is referred to as Orwellian state as predicted by George Orwell in 1984. Set the stage for transhumanism through chip inoculation, and they want to achieve this by 2030. Once again, Google and Neuralink company set up by Elon Musk are at the forefront. An enlightened viewer might raise some very important questions. Can this pandemic be viewed as an asymmetric hybrid warfare against the humanity? Can it be viewed as a declaration of war by the G7 countries against the second and third world nations? Is this a hybrid warfare aimed to cripple the economies of the developing nations? And if that is the case, then it is a direct threat towards the sovereignty of these developing nations, particularly the nations of Southeast Asia and South Asia. Russian President Vladimir Putin has cautioned Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi way back in 2017. However, it has taken a long time for our Prime Minister Narendra Modi to understand the gravity of the situation. I'm going to present exact transcript of this communication. Enlightened viewers might want to know whether this pandemic is an attempt to enslave the entire humanity by 2050 through the implementation of digital economy, one world digital currency tied to one's biometric identity, digital health card, and finally chip inoculation and transhumanism. Is this the essence of biometric surveillance grid, also called as population control grid? Well, viewers can have their own opinion. Enlightened viewers might want to know whether this pandemic has already set the stage for population control starting 2020 through invasive or intrusive healthcare system. Well, viewers can have their opinion. Has this pandemic set the stage for a surveillance state in the name of biosecurity and vaccine passports? Pandemic has also transformed the entire world population into a lucrative market for big pharma companies.
The time when things are shifting, there's going to be a new world order out there.
Now there is a problem here which the ruling elites could foresee. You need to understand that the Western Empire and the ruling elites impose their will, their philosophies and their principles through the American governmental policies. It is the job of the American deep state to implement these policies of the ruling elites using the American statecraft. This is the reason why American statecraft was subverted by the deep state, and today American deep state has become the American statecraft. And America's national security apparatus and its intelligence apparatus is the deep state machinery. Let us now listen to Zbigniew Brzezinski, what he had to say during his speech at Council on Foreign Relations at Montreal, Canada, way back in 2010. Brzezinski was America's 10th National Security Advisor. Brzezinski, along with his mentor and America's 8th National Security Advisor, Henry Kissinger, laid the foundation of America's foreign policy, and this is the time when American deep state completely took over the American statecraft.
Let me begin by making just a thumbnail definition of the geopolitical context in which we all find ourselves, including America. And in my perspective, that geopolitical context is very much defined by two new global realities. The first is that global political leadership, by which I mean the role of certain leading powers in the world, has now become much more diversified unlike what it was until relatively recently. Relatively recently still, the world was dominated by the Atlantic world, as it had been for many centuries. It no longer is. Today, the rise of the Far East has created a new but much more differentiated global leadership, one which in a nutshell involves, if one can hazard, an arbitrary list of the primary players in the world scene: the United States, clearly, maybe next to it, but maybe the European Union. I say maybe because it is not yet a political entity. Certainly, increasingly so, and visibly so, China. Russia, mainly in one respect only, because it is a nuclear power co-equal to the United States, but otherwise very deficient in all of the major indices of what constitutes global power. Behind Russia, perhaps individually, but to a much lesser extent, Germany, France, Great Britain, Japan, certainly, although it does not have a politically assertive posture. India is rising. And then in the background of that, we have the new entity of G20, a much more diversified global leadership, lacking internal unity, with many of its members in bilateral antagonisms. That makes the context much more complicated. The other major change in international affairs is that for the first time in all of human history, mankind is politically awakened. That's a total new reality. Total new reality. It has not been so for most of human history until the last 100 years. And in the course of the last 100 years, the whole world has become politically awakened. And no matter where you go, politics is a matter of social engagement, and most people know what is generally going on in the world, and are consciously aware of global iniquities, inequalities, lack of respect, exploitation. Mankind is now politically awakened and stirring. The combination of the two, a diversified global leadership, politically awakened masses, makes a much more difficult context for any major power, including currently the leading world power, the United States.
Therefore, Big New Brzezinski expected global political awakening, which they thought would become impediments towards the implementation of their agenda. And there were other problems as well. Not all nations would be willing to join this new world order nonsense. Not all governments are spineless. For example, Russian Federation under President Vladimir Putin has made it absolutely clear that they are not going to join this new world order cabal. Russian Federation also doesn't want to buy the narrative of climate change and green energy because one of Russia's main sources of revenue is oil and natural gas. In fact, ruling elites see Russian Federation under Vladimir Putin as a roadblock towards their new world order and Great Reset agenda, that is, the Agenda 2030. What about China? Well, China has a tacit support towards this new world order only if geopolitical world order pivots around China and the balance of power shifts to China from Anglo-American power axis, else not. China is extremely apprehensive whether this is going to happen, this is going to materialize or not. China under Xi Jinping wants to continue with its regional dominance and want to become a global superpower. China doesn't want to squander its regional supremacy and global ambition. China supports one world digital currency only if it is digital yuan, else not. China, however, accepts the narrative of climate change and green energy. Hence, China has started to bargain hard on this. There are several other nations who do not want to join this nonsense called New World Order. Belarus, Serbia, some of the former Yugoslav states, some of the Eastern and Southern European countries such as Greece, Cyprus do not want to join New World Order. Central Asian or Eurasian states such as Mongolia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Armenia do not want to join. West Asian countries such as Iran, Iraq, Syria, Yemen do not want to join. Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Malaysia, Indonesia do not want to join. Several African and South American nations do not want to join this new world order nonsense. Turkey is a curious case though. Turkish government under Recep Tayyip Erdogan wants this time as an opportunity to revive its Ottoman Turk Empire. The way the geopolitical chess game has been unfolding right before our eyes, it becomes absolutely clear that there exists a great deal of polarization in the international politics. That is, the countries are getting aligned into two different poles, the pole that supports New World Order narrative and the pole that does not support New World Order narrative. And this trend became clear for the policymakers such as Brzezinski way back in 2010. From the year 2000 onwards, ruling elites started to put their puppet governments in resource-rich countries. This gathered momentum 2010 onwards. This was done by orchestrating anti-corruption movements and through socio-political or for that matter socio-religious subversion in countries such as India and Brazil. Examples: Bharat Swabhiman movement by Baba Ramdev and company and India Against Corruption movement by Anna Hazare and company. Victory of Narendra Modi-led BJP in 2014 general election and rise of Arvind Kejriwal and Aam Aadmi Party is the direct consequence of this political subversion. Arab Springs in some of the Arab world countries such as Syria, Libya, etc. and in Egypt fall in the same category as well. Countries such as Syria and Libya today stand amid ruins. Western intelligence also orchestrated a coup in Ukraine and as a result, democratically elected Viktor Yanukovych government was overthrown. Viktor Yanukovych had to flee and pro-Western puppet called Petro Poroshenko was instated as the president of Ukraine. Rise of pro-Western Alexei Navalny in Russia is another example. And all this is part of West's regime change formula accomplished through political subversion, also called as political warfare. Through this shrewd maneuver, they made these neutral or traditionally anti-Western countries their own allies. And these countries are resource-rich. They expect people uprising in these countries. Farmers' protest in India was one such example. They also know that a large sect of people in their so-called allied nations such as Germany, Italy, France, the Netherlands do not want to abide by the draconian dictates of New World Order and Great Reset. They expect uprising in these countries as well. This is all the more reason why they want their puppets in the governments. BJP is the political arm of the Indian deep state. RSS is the ideological hub of the Indian deep state. RSS has created the Indian deep state. Just like all other deep states, Indian deep state aims to subvert the Indian statecraft, and as of today, it has managed to do just that and to a large extent. Once Narendra Modi-led BJP government took over, Indian deep state got a free ride. Indian deep state works under the instruction of the American deep state. Indian deep state's task is to get the American policies implemented here in India by using the Indian governmental framework, that is, by using the Indian statecraft. And American policies reflect the wishes of the Western ruling elites, their ideologies, and their philosophies and their principles. This started way back in 1970s. JP movement or Jayaprakash Narayan movement was one such instant. It was orchestrated by the American and British intelligence, and RSS provided ideological, organizational and financial support. For a brief period, Indira Gandhi-led Indian National Congress was overthrown and Morarji Desai-led Janata Sarkar took over. Morarji Desai became India's Prime Minister. Award-winning American journalist Seymour Hersh openly stated that Morarji Desai was on CIA payroll. Exactly in the same manner, India Against Corruption movement, or for that matter Bharat Swabhiman movement, was orchestrated by the American and British intelligence. RSS and RSS-backed Indian deep state managed the show within India and provided ideological, organizational and financial support. Many believe that these movements were plotted by American billionaires and social engineering gurus such as George Soros. American Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and American Senator John McCain oversaw these movements under Obama administration and coordinated with the American intelligence machinery. On behalf of American intelligence, former CIA Director David H. Petraeus was in charge. Money was flown through several American and Western foundations, and people believe that one such foundation is the Ford Foundation. In India, many believe that the current National Security Advisor Ajit Doval managed the whole show from behind through his Vivekananda International Foundation. Ajit Doval was part of India's intelligence fraternity, and he is a former director of Intelligence Bureau. He was also the founder of Vivekananda International Foundation. It is this VIF or Vivekananda International Foundation which organized the so-called anti-corruption movements. Many people believe that. Careful analysis of BJP's rise and Narendra Modi's rise to the political stardom raises many questions. Number one, atrocities, torture and genocide of Kashmiri Pandits and exodus of Kashmiri Pandits from Kashmir Valley during late 80s during VP Singh-led government supported by 85 MPs or Member of Parliaments from BJP. Number two, incursion of Pakistani army during Bajpayee-led BJP government which led to Kargil war and subsequent victory of Bajpayee-led BJP in 1999 general election. Number three, IC-814 hijack and subsequent release of Masood Azhar during Bajpayee-led BJP government which led to the formation of Jaish-e-Mohammed. Ajit Doval's involvement in the negotiation process is also questionable. Number four, Jaish-e-Mohammed's involvement into Parliament attack and Pulwama attack and many such terror attacks. Pulwama attack, of course, changed the course of 2019 general elections outcome. Number five, many unanswered questions regarding Mumbai attack 26/11/2008. Number six, what could be the relations between Ajit Doval and DSP Davinder Singh, a character related to both these events, that is Parliament attack and Pulwama episode. Number seven, from Godhra to Pulwama, it seems as if the political science principle called Hegelian dialectic is being used repeatedly and rampantly. Number eight, supposed role of APCO worldwide in Narendra Modi's image building and perception management and publicity campaign of vibrant Gujarat raises further questions. Number nine, what could be the role of the Indian deep state, if there is any, in all these matters? Naturally, America and West had a great deal of expectations from Narendra Modi, and Narendra Modi didn't let the West down with his policies and principles after taking over in 2014. Number one, I have already talked about the experimentation on cashless society in the name of demonetization. It was a move that was influenced by the American organizations such as USAID and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and Indian citizens ended up being the experimental guinea pigs. Also, an economic war was waged upon India. Number two, India is being gradually transformed into a surveillance state or a police state. Number three, ill-planned and ill-executed GST, that is good and services tax. Number four, farm laws. Number five, Narendra Modi-led BJP government wasted no time in accepting the narrative on pandemic and imposed ill-planned and ill-executed lockdown which wreaked havoc with India's economy. Government didn't find it necessary to question people like Dr. Soumya Swaminathan, the WHO chief scientist who attended the event 201. These are basically lobbyists. Number six, Narendra Modi-led BJP endorsed and imposed all sorts of draconian dictates in the name of pandemic prevention. Number seven, raising and erecting even more stringent surveillance state in the name of biosecurity. Number eight, manifold increase in India's national debts in between 2014 and 2022. Manifold increase in banks' NPA on non-performing assets during this period between 2014 and 2022. Number 9. Massive loan write-offs for Indian super-rich aka crony capitalists. Number 10. Practically facilitated and implemented the loot and scoot model for India's crony capitalists. Number 11. Pushed Indian banking system towards bankruptcy and eventual privatization. We need to remember that one of the major reasons behind the assassination of our former Prime Minister Indira Gandhi is due to the fact that she nationalized the banks. From the start of this new millennium, BJP-led NDA government under then Prime Minister Vajpayee took a pro-Western stance in terms of India's foreign policy, completely disregarding India's non-aligned policy and started to openly support USA, Britain, Israel-led Western camp. Once Narendra Modi-led BJP government came to power in 2014, Narendra Modi went a few notches above Vajpayee in appeasing West. Agreements such as CAATSA was signed in 2016. CAATSA stands for Countering American Adversaries through Sanctions Act. Now, America's adversary may not be India's adversary. United States of America might view Russia as its adversary, but that does not mean that Russia is India's adversary. In fact, Russia is India's most trusted ally and time-tested friend. These discussions, however, are futile unless and until we find out who our real adversaries are. We need to remember, British colonized us through its East India Company, which happens to be an offshoot trading house of Anglo-Dutch banking empire. An Anglo-Dutch banking empire is controlled by the Western ruling elites. India's vast wealth and resources were plundered by the British. This vast wealth and resources were utilized in the development of British industries during 18th, 19th and 20th century. East India companies such as British East India Company, or for that matter Dutch East India Company, or for that matter French East India Company, also looted and plundered China and Indochina, that is Vietnam, Cambodia and Laos. Industrial revolution in Britain and Western countries wouldn't have happened without this loot and plunder from Asia, Africa and South America. And the ethnic communities in these places were subjugated and were pushed into abject poverty, and millions died in these places in famines orchestrated by the West. Anyone who is an ethnic citizen of these places from Laos on east up until Afghanistan on west and thinks that Britain and United States of America are our friends, then he or she must be suffering from memory loss and psychological aberration called cognitive dissonance. We need to remember, the British Empire transformed into the American Empire, that is Pax Britannica, got transformed or metamorphosed into the Pax Americana following the Second World War. So, the American Empire essentially is the continuation of the British Empire. Before the start of the First World War, British authorities in India promised Indian leaders that they would give dominion status to India once the war is over, provided India supports British war efforts in Europe through its manpower and resources. Dominion status implies self-rule or self-governance. During the First World War, Indian soldiers fought in the battlefields across Europe as part of British Indian Army against Imperial Germany, or for that matter Austro-Hungarian Empire. India suffered a staggering loss of lives. I do not want to go by the official figures. As per the reports sent to the London-based Commonwealth War Graves Commission, estimated figures of death toll could be as high as 350,000, that is 350,000. Apart from that, India's vast wealth and natural resources and mineral resources such as coal, iron ore, aluminium, cotton, wood, food grains, tea, coffee were plundered by the British in order to support British war efforts in Europe. That is, British exploited India's manpower and India's resources in order to win a war in Europe. However, after the First World War, British denied India of the dominion status. That is, British deceived India and exploited India's resources by luring India with the prospect of a dominion status. It is this reason Why there was a spike in India's freedom movement following the First World War. This actually influenced India's first Prime Minister Pandit Nehru's foreign policy to a large extent. Nehruji was one of the proponents of non-aligned movement. During the Second World War, British, under the leadership of former Prime Minister and an absolute evil called Winston Churchill, orchestrated the Great Bengal Famine of 1943. Although it was referred to as Great Bengal Famine, in reality it affected entire eastern India, that is undivided Bengal, Bihar, Orissa, Assam and Tripura. Estimated death toll could be as high as 3.8 million people in Bengal alone. As per my research, estimated death toll could be as high as 6 million across entire eastern India. But that is not all. Throughout the British Raj, there were other instances of famine as well. Great Bengal Famine of 1769, Chalisa Famine 1783, Doji Bara Famine 1791, Agra, that is Uttar Pradesh Famine 1837, Orissa Famine 1866, Rajputana Famine 1868, Bihar Famine 1873, South Indian Famine lasted for 3 years, 1875 to 1878, and Great Indian Famine 1899, and I have already talked about the Great Bengal Famine of 1943. Millions died in these famines. British administration under Winston Churchill orchestrated the Great Bengal Famine of 1943, and there is absolutely no doubt about this fact. Churchill comments, "They are a beastly people with beastly religion. Famine was their own fault for breeding like rabbits." That was his comment. That was the comment of the British Prime Minister, then British Prime Minister Winston Churchill. We got to remember this. Does it not constitute an act of war against the people of India? It constitutes an act of waging a war against the people of India with an intention to kill the Indians. And today I am saying Judeo-Christian Anglo-American Western Empire will pay for this crime against the humanity. India's partition is a direct consequence of British-American conspiracy. British intelligence orchestrated riots all over India, particularly along the fault lines in Punjab and Bengal. Millions perished in this process, and now look what Winston Churchill commented on India's partition. Well, if our poor troops have to be kept in a sweltering, syphilitic climate for the sake of your precious unity, I would rather see them have a good civil war. So, basically, Britain orchestrated a civil war during India's partition. So, you understand who was behind this carnage. Question, is it not a heinous crime against the humanity? In between 1969 and 1971, Bengalis in East Pakistan were persecuted and slaughtered by the Pakistani army. More than 3 million Bengalis were murdered. It was a genocide of massive proportion. Over 1 million women got raped. It was an unprecedented crime against the humanity. It finally ended with a war between India and Pakistan in 1971, which India won handsomely with help from Russia. It was a decisive victory for India, and Pakistan was cut into two and Bangladesh was liberated. Throughout those dark days, Pakistan continued to enjoy the patronage of United States of America, Britain and the combined West. In fact, United States of America and Britain orchestrated the genocide of Bengalis in East Pakistan through the involvement of Pakistani army. West remained silent and continued to support this crime against humanity, and finally, when the war broke out between India and Pakistan, and once they found that Pakistan was losing, United States of America and Britain ended up sending carrier battle groups to threaten India. Russians saved the day and prevented a catastrophe. Who scripted these crimes against humanity? Henry Kissinger, a Jewish German refugee turned America's 8th national security advisor and an open advocate of political Zionism. In order to avenge the strategic defeats in Vietnam War and in Bangladesh War in 1971, United States of America and Britain came up with a sinister plan to destabilize India, USSR and Iran through proxy war and terrorism. This entire project was planned and managed by Henry Kissinger and his disciple Zbigniew Brzezinski, the 10th National Security Advisor of United States of America. Groundwork started in 1971, and in 1973, King of Afghanistan, Muhammad Zahid Shah, was removed in a coup. In 1977, American intelligence orchestrated yet another coup, this time in Pakistan, and American stooge called Muhammad Ziaul Haq was instated as Pakistani president. Zia would start the radicalization of the Pakistani society, and under Zia, Pakistan would become a de facto US base for waging a proxy war against India in one hand and USSR on the other hand. United States of America spreads a big lie that their support for Taliban was in response to Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, which started in 1979. But in reality, Soviets invaded Afghanistan in 1979 in response to the US-Britain-Pak activities in Afghanistan, which was perceived by the USSR as a threat. Kindly watch a video clip from 1979. You'd see America's 10th National Security Advisor, Zbigniew Brzezinski, brainwashing rather simple Afghan tribal men along Pakistan-Afghanistan border near Khyber Pass. And all this happened in 1979. Kindly watch.
US National Security Advisor Brzezinski flew to Pakistan to set about rallying resistance. He wanted to arm the Mujahideen without revealing America's role. On the Afghan border near the Khyber Pass, he urged the soldiers of God to redouble their efforts.
We know of their deep belief in God, and we are confident that their struggle will succeed. You know, that land over there is yours. You'll go back to it one day because your fight will prevail and you'll have your homes and your mosques back again because your cause is right and God is on your side.
The purpose of coordinating with the Pakistanis will be to make the Soviets bleed for as much and as long.
Therefore, once again, I bring back the same old question. Who is our adversary? Our adversaries are Britain, United States of America, Israel, and their Western allies. But once Narendra Modi-led BJP came to power in 2014, Narendra Modi started to disregard all this and wasted no time in jumping into the Western bandwagon and started to buy the Western narratives. Indian foreign policy got degraded to Narendra Modi's Hakdiplomacy. Indian foreign policy became an instrument of Narendra Modi's PR and publicity campaign. Narendra Modi and BJP's IT cell used Narendra Modi's overseas tours and his meetings with foreign leaders in order to portray him as a statesman. Foreign policy was degraded to perception management of Narendra Modi among India's voters. And this continued unabated in between 2014 up until 2021. Indian deep state was happy with Narendra Modi as their purpose was being served. American deep state too was happy. All the draconian diktats came during this time frame: demonetization, farm laws, loot and scoot model for crony capitalists or India's crony capitalists, massive surge in bank NPA, that is non-performing assets, push towards bank privatization, signing of CATSA. Even there was a serious attempt to integrate Indian armed forces with NATO in 2016-2017 timeframe. Importantly, West has understood Narendra Modi's weakness, that he is a sociopath and a narcissist. West has also understood that he is extremely insecure about his image and his perception among India's voters. West obliged him by creating a hype around his persona using mainstream media. West kept on doing Narendra Modi's ego massage. Probably West lured Narendra Modi with the prospect of a Nobel Peace Prize as well. India's Foreign Secretary turned India's External Affairs Minister, Dr. Subramaniam Jaishankar, is a bright exception in Narendra Modi's cabinet. In my opinion, Dr. S. Jaishankar has managed to bring Narendra Modi out of the influence of pro-Western Ajit Doval and his national security apparatus, at least in the matters of foreign policy and at least to a certain extent. By the middle of 2021, thanks to S. Jaishankar, Narendra Modi has started to understand the true nature of this pandemic. That is, essentially, it is a case of or an act of asymmetric hybrid warfare. Image-conscious Narendra Modi has understood that he might go down in the history as a total failure and a weak, worthless prime minister. He also understands that his popularity has taken a steep nosedive. Investigative journalists from Great Game India correctly points out the real motive of United States of America, Britain and the combined West. West wants to save the fledgling Western economies through the exploitation of India. I quote, "As often, history makes it a habit to repeat itself. In the last 200 years, whenever the West was in trouble, East India companies or subsequent managing partners of East India companies plundered India's human and natural resources for their survival. In this great game, they kept other geopolitical players at bay. And this is exactly what is happening now." Several things have influenced Narendra Modi's slight change in policies, particularly his foreign policy. Number one, Dr. S. Jaishankar's point of view on neutral foreign policy. Number two, interactions with Russian President Vladimir Putin and inputs from Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Number three, Narendra Modi is not willing to blindly accept the Western narrative on climate change and green energy. This is due to his commitments for Ambanis and Adanis, who are in pole position in energy sector, in conventional energy sector in India, and have heavily invested in conventional energy sources. Number four, Narendra Modi has understood, at least to a certain extent, that West wants to destroy the existing industrial infrastructure of second and third world countries by compelling these countries to accept the narrative on climate change and green energy. This would make him even more unpopular as unemployment would grow. He doesn't want that. This is the reason why Narendra Modi has adopted a rather neutral foreign policy stance starting 2021. And all this after abusing Pandit Nehru for the last 7 years. Nehruji was a champion of foreign policy matters and was a pioneer of non-aligned movement. Not only that, following America's Afghanistan debacle in 2021, Narendra Modi pivoted slightly towards Russia. Indian ambassador to Palestine Mukul Arya was found dead inside the embassy premise on March 7, 2022. Question comes, was it a warning by the West towards India's slight change in the foreign policy? Is it a threat towards our External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar? Question comes. RSS and the Indian deep state is not happy with these changes either. After all, Indian deep state act under the instruction of the Western deep state, and hence recently a senior cabinet minister from Narendra Modi's cabinet has supposedly sent a veiled threat to Narendra Modi. If you have the guts to throw me out of your cabinet, I will walk out of your cabinet with 252 members of parliament, and I have the ability to bring down your government. The senior cabinet minister is close to RSS. He is also an open advocate of green energy. And if he becomes the Prime Minister of India, he would be much worse than Narendra Modi. This is my opinion. Well, I am not a fan of Narendra Modi. I know that he is bad. But this senior cabinet minister, if he becomes the Prime Minister of India, he would be worse than Narendra Modi. That's my opinion. This is being orchestrated by the West. West wants to coerce India to their side and then push India into a conflict and then exploit India's vast resources. This is the game plan, and this has been quite well articulated by the authors of Great Game India. Recent political development in Pakistan must be viewed from this perspective as well. Just like Indian deep state, Pakistan too has a deep state which comprises of elements from its armed forces and almost entire ISI, that is inter-services intelligence. Pakistani deep state too serves the interest of the American and Western deep state. West wants Pakistani army to take control of Pakistan and then launch a freak attack on India, thereby forcing India to retaliate. Remember, Indian deep state has already tried this through the freak supersonic missile strike in Pakistan. Instead of Imran Khan or Imran Khan government, if there was a military martial ruler, it would have resulted into a war. It was just a necessary provocation which Pakistan would have used to strike back at India. Imran Khan government has actually prevented this from happening. United States of America, Britain and West wants military rule in Pakistan and wants Pakistan to do the same thing with India. And Indian mainstream media or the propaganda media would then take over and create the war hysteria and Zingoism. Remember, India's mainstream media works under the instructions of Indian deep state, which in turn safeguards the Western interest. This way, West thinks it would be possible to coerce China into the war as well, since China is a strategic partner of Pakistan. This would make sure India and Russia get separated in the geopolitical chess game because Russia and China are close allies and Russia is a strategic partner of China. West wants India and Russia to be adversaries and not friends. Remember, this is one of the most important goals of the American and Western deep state. They want India and Russia to be adversaries and not friends. Indian deep state and the Pakistani deep state are working alongside the Western deep state. They're working in tandem alongside the Western deep state in implementing this. West wants to bring the war to Asia. This is their another very important objective. President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, is an astute politician. He has understood all this, and all this influenced his decision to initiate a special military operation in Ukraine so as to keep NATO busy in Europe, keep NATO entangled in Europe, keep CIA busy in Europe. That's his plan. Now, I suggest some policy matters which Narendra Modi should follow in order to counter this shrewd maneuver by the West. Point number 1. Buy more oil and natural gas from Russia. India has decided to buy a little bit of oil from Russia, and United States of America has started to bully India. Many European countries haven't stopped importing oil and natural gas from Russia, and United States of America itself has increased oil import from Russia by 43%. So this is the definition of Western hypocrisy. This is the nature of American hypocrisy. And the best possible way to punish a hypocrite is to do something which hypocrite doesn't want you to do. Point number 2. Relieve Ajit Doval with immediate effect from National Security Advisor's duty. Bring sweeping changes in India's national security apparatus. Remove all Ajit Doval loyalists from India's national security apparatus. Point number 3. Elevate Dr. S. Jaishankar to the position of India's national security advisor. Bring someone like G. Parthasarathi and give him the chair of External Affairs Minister. Point number 4. Create a new position called Defense Advisor or Military Advisor. Bring someone like General Vikram Singh or for that matter Lieutenant General Dipender Singh Hooda in this position. Point number 5. Rethink the utility and effectiveness of Quad in light of AUKUS. In my opinion, Quad comprising of USA, India, Japan and Australia has lost its real significance in light of AUKUS comprising of Australia, UK and USA. Quad, according to me, is a shrewd diplomatic maneuver of the United States of America to keep tension alive between India and China. This is an impediment towards the restoration of peace and normalcy between India and China. Point number 6. India can strike a deal with China that China would go back to March 2020 status on ground in all friction points in Ladakh, Arunachal Pradesh and Sikkim, and India would come out of Quad because India's participation in Quad didn't stop China from making those incursions in the first place. Point number 7. Talk to opposition leaders and create a cordial atmosphere with the opposition. Point number 8. Keep a hawk eye on anyone trying to orchestrate people's unrest or people uprising. Point number 9. Take tough measures against people spreading hatred and communal tension, particularly the RSS BJP fraction who are doing this. Point number 10. strengthen the security envelope of Dr. S. Jaishankar and even Prime Minister Narendra Modi as well. Let us summarize the whole thing. There is no doubt that Narendra Modi adopted a pro-Western foreign policy in between 2014 up until 2021, completely disregarding the fact that India's main adversaries are Britain, United States of America, Israel, and the combined West. However, of late, he has shown an inclination towards adopting a more balanced approach in the foreign policy matters. I have already stated that the authors of Great Game India have opined that the imperial and colonial powers of West still haven't given up on India and would love to plunder and loot India's vast resources in order to save their fledgling economy. Therefore, India's threat to sovereignty is quite real. This was corroborated by Russian President Vladimir Putin in a candid discussion with Prime Minister Narendra Modi way back in 2017. Vladimir Putin quite rightly thinks that the sovereignty has to be fiercely protected. Yet, it took Narendra Modi more than 4 years to understand this. You may pause this video and read these few points of Mr. Vladimir Putin. Although, in more recent times, Narendra Modi has shown an inclination to adopt a more balanced approach in foreign policy matters, I do not know how long he would be able to continue in that fashion. Already, we see that he is flip-flopping. We need to remember, Deep State has played a significant role in Narendra Modi's rise to political stardom. So will Narendra Modi be able to show the courage to dismantle the Indian Deep State, which has played a significant role in his 2014 and in 2019 victory? Will he be able to shut down all the activities of Rockefeller Foundation, Ford Foundation, Clinton Foundation, or for that matter, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation? After all, people say that Ajit Doval's VIF, that is Vivekananda International Foundation, or for that matter, his son's Shaurya Doval's India Foundation, is a beneficiary of some of these foundations. Will he be able to question influencers and lobbyists such as Jaggi Vasudev, Deepika Padukone, Soumya Swaminathan, or for that matter Gagandeep Kang? Will he be able to question the popular narrative on this pandemic? Will he be able to take tough measures on RSS BJP faction who are spreading hate and communal tension in the society after playing polarization politics all throughout his life? I am apprehensive. And even if he shows the willpower to do so, will the Indian Deep State and the Western Deep State allow him to do that? Remember, the Deep State is basically a criminal syndicate and their policy is use and throw. Therefore, I am quite concerned about Narendra Modi's safety and security as well. However, I also think that Narendra Modi's alternatives within his own party, such as Nitin Gadkari, are worse than him. Also, people such as Arvind Kejriwal are far worse than him. This is my personal opinion. Also, people might talk about Ajit Doval becoming a president or prime minister. Again, I believe he would be much worse than Narendra Modi.